Welcome, everybody, to the American Space Museum. I'm Mark Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious. Today, we're staying curious with Dr. Gary Stutte. Welcome, sir.
Glad to be here.
We're glad you're here. Gary is a plant expert of growing things in space. And Gary, you've been on our Stay Curious program before. You're no stranger to the American Space Museum. Welcome.
Well, it's always good to come back.
How things going for you lately? Your company, Synergy, Synrgy, here on the Space Coast, doing things to promote feeding astronauts going to Mars and the Moon and stuff.
Mars and Moon, what we work with technologies to grow plants on space, apply those here on Earth. We established this company with the specific goal of being able to take the technology to keep 4, 6, 8 people alive on a mission to the Moon and Mars and apply that to feeding the extra 3, 4 billion people that are coming to this planet.
How quick are those extra 3 or 4 billion coming?
Oh, they're coming faster. Faster than
well, my daughter's pregnant, so I can give you testimony to that.
Well, they're looking like we're going to have another 3 billion in the next 25 years.
Really?
Yes.
I remember in 1974, I went to the UN Population Conference, actually. It was in Bucharest, Romania. And there was like 4 billion people on the planet 50 years ago.
Right.
And a guy named Paul Ehrlich said that if we had hit 8 billion, it'd be a catastrophe. Well, we're pushed 7 billion now.
We're at 7 billion. We're looking at getting close to 9 to 10. And there are, those implications are now occurring worldwide. We're seeing that in very, intense urban areas. Here in North America, we're buffered from a lot of that at this point. But you go start going to the tropics, going around much of the developing world, population growth is increasing, at least for the next 25, 30 years. And then it's going to slowly begin to go down. At least that's what the projections are.
Well, we are going to hear from Gary about how space industry plant technology that he's been involved in for over 3 decades is being used on Earth. Now, what are we looking at in our green screen here, Gary?
Those are some lettuce. They're being grown hydroponically, which means they don't have any soil, and they are being grown under some light-emitting diodes or LED lights. And every one of those technologies has been promoted and developed by NASA to grow plants in space, primarily for safety reasons and logistical reasons. But as those activities have become optimized, they begin being applied, to broader agriculture.
Well, one of those agricultures you hear in the news a lot is the cannabis industry and the medical marijuana and things for CBD ointments and stuff like that. It is incredible how this has changed in 10 years. And you're not part of the cannabis industry, but your techniques are.
Much of the lighting, we began working on that in the early 90s. And then the cannabis industry, it's enabled very efficient lights now to begin coming in so you can grow indoors. It's enabled vertical farming, not only for cannabis, but for lettuce and tomatoes and lights that can get close to the plants. Because most of the traditional lights we've been using they get hot.
You're right.
They get hot. They break. They need to be replaced.
So you can't have that in space, of course.
You can't have that in space, which is why we started looking for an alternative.
Are we going to have to put up like a whole modular section of a greenhouse to feed people in space, or what's the
well, it depends on how far along we go and what our progress is. Currently on the space station, they're small cubes, not much bigger than this desk, but they're growing things like peppers, and we've been growing lettuce and mizunas and tomatoes. So to supplement a diet. I mean, they've been making salads and making tacos. So it's
So we have been eating food in outer space there on our future Fridays. We got Kate Rubens up there. Looks like some good lettuce there, maybe.
Yep. Kate has been growing. There have been really something going on for about 8 years on the U.S. side. The Russians have been growing things and eating on their side a wee bit longer than us.
Have they? beets and stuff like that.
Beets,
No one else wants
things like
They're
Mizuna. They're like these bitter greens. Pretty
Uh-huh.
popular nowadays.
What is the oregano you said, or
It's a Mizuna,
Mizuna?
but it's in the same family as arugula.
Mm-hmm.
But we've been growing more traditional vegetables.
Well, we got out of starting our Stay Curious
Yep.
program. Glad that everybody's with us today. Start talking a lot about Gary before we introduce the whole program, really. Marty Winkle, good to see you. You are a long-distance running friend with Gary here. You guys like to run them marathons and stuff, right?
Yes, we've run several marathons together, and Marty was, the primary one keeping us on track and letting us know what we did for many, many years.
Oh, was he? Okay.
Absolutely.
He keeps me on track, and I appreciate that.
Marty had I think the longest streak we have in the county for continuous running.
Is that right? How long was that streak, Marty? Saying hello to you.
Yeah, it was just under 24 years, running a minimum of 1 mile a day, but I averaged 6.2 miles a day.
Yep.
24 years of running more than a mile a day, and usually 6 miles a day.
Yeah, and Marty hosted a weekend run for distant runners for many, many years.
Well, good to hear Marty there speaking on our USIAC family microphone. I'd like to say, Marty, congratulations. This is our 900th episode on Stay Curious today.
900.
900.
Well, I feel honored to be here.
We're
for
glad you're
900.
here. Born out of the pandemic, the first program was March 23rd, 2020, and we are well into our 4th year of doing this. And not only Marty and I gotten to know each other like brothers through this, we've learned a hell of a lot about space history and astronauts and space workers. Like, unbelievable. It's incredible. Right, Marty?
Yeah, except we're a long way off combined compared to Nick Thomas.
Yes, yeah, right. We got a ways to go for astronaut wrangler Nick Thomas and his knowledge of it, but no one usurped him in his 35 years of wrangling astronauts there. But really, it's because of you all out there watching the show, you Dave Stange and Doug Forrest out there, Chris Calley, the USIAC brothers, regular people out there like Gary Gerald. They're familiar with you coming on here and you and me on here. And it makes what over there, we'll have you sign in our board. You haven't signed it this year,
No.
I don't think. But maybe you might be up there. You were here in March.
There I am.
There you are. We have over 60 people we're looking at our autograph board here that have been on Stay Curious this year. So, we love living on the Space Coast. You've lived here. We want to talk about our memorabilia show that's going to be a week from Saturday. You may pre-bid now. We've got lots of things from astronaut Woody Springs' collection. You ever
really?
met Woody?
I haven't actually.
He's a great guy. He got caught up in the shuttle disaster with Challenger, so he only flew once in '85, or he would have been a traveler 3 or 4 times. But we got these Robbins medals that astronauts take to space, and all kinds of things on the auction. And Marty and I will be featuring many things on the auction next week, leading up to this important fundraiser for the American Space Museum. And this is a picture Gary took here, my guest, Dr. Gary Stutte. Gary, these noisy rockets keeping us up in the middle of the night, dogs barking, all that stuff.
Wind is rattling. We've turned into an actual spaceport. It's going to not be too long. People will want to move away because it's too noisy out here.
That's right. That was a gorgeous shot you took and sent me one day. You probably can't remember which one it was.
I don't remember which one it was, but what I really liked about that, you still have the plume. You see this, what they are referred to as the jellyfish, which is just a sound wave, the light hitting the sound wave. I just find that absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it is.
Going out, and if you look at the top, there is the sound wave starting to come back with the boosters on their return.
Yeah, it's just very fun. We're used to it, but there's so many people that go out to Spaceview Park and other places, and it'll be the only rocket launch they ever see in their lives. And that was me. Yep. All right, 5 or 6 years ago before I moved here. And
well, they never get old.
They
never get old.
Yeah. Well, here's a great picture of you being interviewed by the German PBS TV. Tell them what that event was, Gary.
Well, they were showing out up here for the Artemis launch,
Mm-hmm.
and so we did, which
It was
was
in August. That was
That was in
August.
August.
Scrub. That was sunrise.
that was the August scrub. So we had some conversations about what we did, and ultimately they came out to our lab in the Space Life Science Laboratory. They did an interview, and if you go to the Synergy website, there is an aired segment, a very long segment about the lab, what we're doing here in the commercialization of space, and I mean, I don't understand a lot of it because it got translated into German, but I can read my lips, so mostly I know what I'm saying.
Marty was interviewed. That was an awesome experience. What a great group of people. ZNR or something like that is
ZN2, yep.
It's the German PBS station. Beautiful woman was the anchor there. These two gentlemen hung out with us for 3 or 4 days. Marty, you were interviewed on there.
Yeah.
But Gary, you're an international traveler. You've gone all around the world talking about plants. There's your Synergy there. You're an Arkansas Razorback, educated at
I am.
in there, and so Fayetteville, Arkansas is dear to your heart, huh?
Fayetteville, Arkansas is where I graduated high school. Went to 2 years of college there. My brothers still live in Fayetteville. I call it home. But after 2 years in Fayetteville, I ended up going to Oklahoma. So I'm a cowboy from Stillwater.
Okay.
Then I ended up going down to Georgia, being a Georgia
Oklahoma
Bulldog.
City, or what?
Not in Stillwater.
Yeah,
That's in
right.
Stillwater. Then I went to Athens, Georgia. Then out to California at UC Davis.
Where's this picture at? Tell people what that
Okay, the
is.
Space Life Science Laboratory is right at the gate of Kennedy Space Center. It used to be inside the gate and was developed and designed to process biological experiments to go to the space station. And then at the end of after the shuttle program ended, the state of Florida, who built it and owned it on government lands, manages it. And now a series of experiments of companies related to space have their laboratories and offices there. So it's acting as a axis there to take the commercialization of space and apply it here to the state of Florida.
A quarter mile east is the complex for Blue Origin, and in between the two is OneWeb design there. So
and you go right past the visitor center, and when things are needing to come in and out there, they can open the gate and go on to that property.
Do you have a relationship with the visitor center? Doing any demonstrations out
No,
there?
I don't. That would be something I would like to develop actually.
Okay.
I mean we go out there. They do an outstanding job, and but it's a little tricky when you have live plants and setting these up to maintain those with that many people coming through. But that's certainly something I would look forward to exploring possibilities on.
Well, hope that does that.
Yep.
Always forward thinking. Delaware North managing Kennedy Space Center out there. Here's off your webpage. You want to go to Synergy LCC. Just get a beautiful, cool logo there that you have. The International Space Station orbiting over your words there. Why did you pick this word Synergy?
Well, Synergy came from a name of 3 flight experiments I've done. One was on Synergy was on the final mission of the International Space of the Space Shuttle STS-135. I felt very honored to have an experiment on it.
Oh wow!
And when that came back down, and then after that ended, I worked with a group in Ireland, and we got funded for a much smaller payload to look at plant microbe interactions, so synergenic effects. And the first one went up on SpaceX Cargo Resupply Mission 4. And then we had another one that went up as, I think that was on 8. So it is, that was our transition to be able to take the name from that experiment to a private company. So now as a private company, we can make partnerships with various groups to start taking that space application down to Earth, which was, a shift for us and me, because what my mindset had been, I'm learning what I can here from Earth to apply that to go to the Moon and Mars. Now I can use this resource that we have, this beautiful underutilized space station for science, and apply those to some of the truly serious applications coming on here at Earth.
Very good. There's what you talked about. 2 major events will occur in the foreseeable future.
Yep. And there are the first, I believe it deeply, that we will have a person on Mars. And as I say, this achievement will establish us as an interplanetary species and will be the enduring symbol of our capacity to turn our ideas into realities. It will exceed that psychic more than when we're stepping on the moon. But at the same time, we're going to have another 3 billion people come on this planet. And that's going to challenge how we think about ourselves, our neighbors, our resources, and to take those two, to look at one and not the other, I think is very short-sighted. We need to take those lessons to keep us alive on Mars, reuse, reutilize, sustainability, and apply those to the resources here.
Well, you can't hardly talk about going to Mars and food on Mars without talking about some potatoes on Mars.
Yeah, you gotta have taters.
Yeah, you gotta have taters there. And Hazel, our wonderful volunteer, Connie McDaniel, she's thoroughly happy that we're talking about potatoes and her favorite movie, The Martian, there, that really popularized Old Spud's nutrition wise and so forth on there. You go all over the world, Gary, and you were just recently in Spain and so forth. The people, like I'm doing here, equate potatoes to Mars.
Absolutely. We go to Mars. The Martian did a wonderful thing of putting those together. I have now copies of The Martian in 5 different languages of countries I have traveled to, and if you look at it from the horticulturist and the rocket scientist point of view, there's so many things wrong with that movie, but they got the big things right. I mean, what they've got is, in order to stay alive, we're going to have bioregenerative life support, ways to get rid of the carbon dioxide, create the water, create the oxygen, repurify our water, using microbes to build a soil, and in the process you produce your food. And we've grown an awful lot of potatoes back when I was working at the biomass production chamber.
Well, there's it is serious business. Here's one of your slides there. Regolith.
Regolith is our nerdy name for dirt.
Okay.
On the moon or Mars, but it doesn't have any. It has nutrients, but they're not really available. So this was a project we did in conjunction with the University of North Dakota, and they had simulated Martian regolith. We began using that through a biological process, vermiculture. We were running them through worms. We were taking the waste food that these crews that are in a habitat, they've got a habitat up there, neat stuff. And we were working those with simulated regolith, and that allowed the worms to do a biological weathering. So things that would take, hundreds of years to release the available nutrients, we were able to do in a period of weeks by using worms. And so if you look at those, anything we put into them, they would germinate then die. When we were adding up to like 25% of that regolith, we could get things to grow. We're not up to where it can do here on Earth, but we went from nothing to something. Mm-hmm. So I was very, very happy with that project.
Interesting. Here's a slide life support requirements there. We're not going to go through the whole chart there, but to illustrate that the science is being done and you do have inputs and outputs.
I like this one because there are 4 things you need to really stay alive. You've got to have fresh oxygen. You've got to remove the CO2 from the atmosphere. You've got to have water, and you have food. And as we go to the moon or Mars, we just don't dump it out. So if I take in roughly 30 kilograms of inputs to keep me alive a day, I've got about that going out every day too.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm either going to be living with a pile of,
Manure.
unprocessed manure and urine and trying to keep a supply going of water and food, or I can reuse and recycle. And
Which they do on the International Space Station.
they
with the water.
currently do on the water, and we've spent a good portion of my career looking at how we can use that biological life support to take our waste CO2, turn that into fresh oxygen, use plants through transpiration to take our contaminated water, bring that back, extract the nutrients, and have fresh water. And in the process, produce food.
Well, how are we doing in the 21st century? You were you worked on this in the 20th century. I mean, here a quarter ways through this new century.
How are we doing?
Yeah.
Poorly. There were programs through NASA, international agreements with the former Soviet Union. There were agreements with the Japanese space agencies, and we had some very large habitats that were being grown for bioregenerative life support, and those were canceled following the when was that? Have been in about 2004, 2005, and mothballed. So really for the past, going on the last 20 years, the U.S. has not had a robust closed system bioregenerative life support system. It is an area I think, NASA and the private industries need to get back into some integrated efforts to get biological life support as a priority. We have all got to eat.
Well, something that strikes me, I've known you 5 years, is just something you hit on. I'm surprised that this industry, let me put it this way, it seems like there's just a handful of Gary Stuttes out there that are experts in this space biology. Am I correct?
You are absolutely correct.
And why? I would think like there'd be people knocking on your door and you'd be wanting to clone yourself 20 times over.
You are right. There are people knocking on my door, the figurative knocking on the door, popping up on my emails and LinkedIn feeds, and wanting to work in this area, find this an exciting area, but it is not a funded area. There are experiments on growing plants in space. We're looking at the science and the biology of how that happens. There is some integration, some outstanding work is going on out here at KSC with the team out there, but it's not enough. It's not enough. We need to start integrating the physical systems for life support with the biological systems and the humans, and start having integrated tests again.
Mm-hmm. And it's not a hot topic in universities, is it? Robotics is, and AI. Okay.
AI and robotics, and that's not to say there's not some very good work going on out there. I mean, there is, but it is not a consorted program within the agency at this time.
Well, that does puzzle me. Maybe you out there. This is about sustaining our human body. We're concerned about rocket fuels, but not human fuel, huh?
Well, I think absolutely. I think the priority goes, well, let's get there, and then we'll figure out. We've got to get the rocket up there before we figure out how we're going to take care of ourselves.
But Gary, by the time we get to Mars, you and I are going to be like kind of a few years older.
Absolutely.
We're not going to be able to call up Dr. Gary Stutte and say, "Hey, what was that fertilizer for potatoes you told us to use?"
And what there are efforts in, like in Europe, they have had the Eden Project, which NASA has supported by sending individuals out to grow there on the South Pole. But that's not to say there's not progress, but in my view, it's not the concerted effort that's needed.
Well,
I'll step down off my box right now.
Well, I wanted to get you up on the box there. I've, like I said, that's something that I've followed your career a little bit, and it's you hear a lot about artificial intelligence. My gosh, in the last two years, it's just exploded.
Yeah.
Like memory and it's gotten cheaper and things like that. And here you are working with this plant right here.
Yeah, that is sweet. That was I'm very proud of that experiment. It was done in increment 4. We called PEST a photosynthesis experiment in
2002, 20 years ago.
Yeah, 20 years ago. On that, we had 7 different cartridges that we pre-planted that we took out and regrew plants. On the space station, something called the biomass production system. Very nice piece of hardware. We were up for 73 days. And I only recently learned that was a record that was just beat this last year with the chili peppers.
Okay, chili peppers.
Yeah, when they were growing chili peppers.
Not the group chili peppers.
Not the group chili peppers. Right. But no, that experiment, we were able to grow 95% germination of the seeds. They grew as well as better in space than on Earth. And we were able to demonstrate a lot of physiology. We wrote a lot of papers out of it. But ultimately, it said to me that I can grow plants as well in space as I can on Earth. We should be going to Mars.
Well, let's see a few space station pictures here. Our backdrop there. There's Kate Rubins.
Yeah.
We talked about that a little earlier, but what's going on there? And why she got that? Look what she's got in her hand. She's got duct tape.
Well,
A roll of duct tape in her hand there.
yeah, I don't exactly know why she's got that
That's to
duct
tape up the aluminum foil that's on the top there for reflector, right?
They'll do duct tape works really good at cleaning vents, removing dust and vents that are coming on, and that is the largest unit now that's on the International
That's
Station.
the biggest garden in space right now.
That's the biggest garden in space. It's the Advanced Plant Habitat. I think that they're growing radishes in there, and it's a wonderful piece of machinery.
Mm-hmm. Did you have something to build in that, or?
They were on the early phases. They were just getting started about the time I left to begin Synergy.
Okay, here's some of the LED technical things of growing that lettuce in space.
So one of the things that you can do with these light emitting diodes that you cannot do with the lights that are illuminating us, the traditional ones, is control the wavelengths. So by altering the spectra or the color of those lights, I can go from making, I've got red, just red light, and I add a little bit of blue, and I can make those things turn deep purple. So I can increase the nutritional content, I can get the form, I can get the bioprotective, what we call the health benefits, to keep people healthy with no extra power, no new germplasm, just by controlling the lights. And that project was actually supported as an effort to use plants and increasing that concentration as a countermeasure to radiation as you began, astronauts would experience as they get outside, on missions to Moon and Mars.
You said there, we talked the last time you were on about a psychosocial element of plants in space.
Yeah.
What is psychosocial?
That psychosocial is a big word that means that we tend to feel good when when we're working with plants, or we use the plants in our food as part of our social engagement. So eating around fresh food. So if you're in this period of isolation of having fresh food, that harvest, those meals, that's the social aspect.
There's a restaurant that advertises endless salad bar.
Endless
That
salad
makes
bar.
you feel good hearing about it, huh?
Because, well, it does if you have fresh food. If you come in and you smell those fresh foods. But you saw those pictures in that last one. The International Space Station is very engineered. It's very closed. It's very tight. It sounds like a machine. Yet there is a very small bit that is the veggie. Yeah, where the astronauts in 2015 started harvesting lettuce. You can get those smells. That is, grown, tasted, and you get those mouth feels. You're not eating dehydrated food, although it's gone a lot better than it had when we first started.
Now, this is more than just a picture. This is a moment in space history.
That is an absolute moment in space history, because that was the first time NASA had authorized our astronauts had grown lettuce. They had grown it themselves. Now they were eating it and producing it as food.
For the very first time. There you got JAXA astronaut Huey. You got Scott Kelly on the right. And in the middle is Jill Lindgren, that NASA astronaut there. So, that's...
So it provided a focus point. And, this is an effort that's been going on for a very long time. I've put that together, just some evolution of the types of plant hardwares and things that have grown related to food. Not so much some of the other plants we use to figure out how gravity works, but in '97, the first experiment I got engaged with was a collaborative Ukrainian experiment. They were growing in foam, and now you come together 30 years later, a highly controlled units where we're able to produce food.
I find that so interesting, Marty, that Dr. Stutte's telling us here, Megan MacArthur there in 2018, that is the garden right there.
That is the garden.
Like a big microwave oven there.
That's about the size.
I'll bet and they're grown chili peppers. She is there, 2018. Yeah. You see lettuce in the middle.
You got some lettuce, and you got the Russian
soybeans,
unit.
Huh? There's a crop that this farm boy from Ohio is familiar with.
Well, see, the part of it, we had an evolution of thinking. When we started looking at advanced life support, we wanted crops that were very productive. They were getting us our oils and giving us calories, and would photosynthesize and produce our water and clear our atmosphere, give us the oxygen, purify our water. So we were looking at things like potatoes and soybeans and rice and wheat. But as time went on, in the early times, we won't have the power for that. So now we go to minimally processed foods, things where all of my inputs I can eat. Like if a lettuce, all of my energy, all of my time, all of the light, I can eat 95% of it.
Interesting. Well, Gary can't go up there to the International Space Station and see what's going on, but you can put on some VR glasses there, and relive watching them there. that was
a fun afternoon.
I'll tell you what you bought from us on that afternoon. All those little gnomes.
I did.
And I think your wife didn't talk to you for a week.
Well,
we had all these little character gnomes, yard gnomes around, and at a yard sale we had there. There's Karan, Conklin, our executive director, and you're looking at one of the games we had.
Yeah, well, she talked to me she did talk to me for a week, and then she discovered I'd bought them.
Oh, okay. well, you've got a big property there. I'm sure they look cute out there, but. There you are being more serious. What you growing there?
Okay, those are different types of lettuces and greens. Those were some pillows that we were evaluating prior to the flight of the veggie. another one of the pieces of plant hardware that's now on the International Space Station.
Interesting. We're going to look at some other pictures here that we racked up just to kind of give you some ideas of the growing units and things that Gary's been involved with for 30 years.
Because what has happened is those lights and those pillows and those different ways of watering are now being applied, to feed the 3 billion people that are coming to the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So the ability to tightly control hydroponics, to stack plants up with lights, have taken from that picture you're now showing, I guess, behind us here, some of the first vertical farming, I think, in the world. Yeah.
Have you been to Orlando Convention Center recently? They've got a vertical farm of stuff in there.
They do.
I thought of you immediately when I saw that. It's in the lobby. It's a huge area. It goes up 15 feet probably.
And for many years going into the land, there was a mock-up of that biomass production chamber of the plants growing up in it as you took the ride into the tunnel.
We're enjoying this conversation with Dr. Gary Stutte, as usual. Been on our show a few times, a great friend of the museum. If you're going to have plants, you're going to have bugs, and you need microbes.
Right.
You have to have a complete environmental system of ecology and nutrition going on. So you've been studying that extensively.
We've been studying that for about the past 10 years. How do you take beneficial microbes and use those to increase the resistance of the plants to stress? I
never thought of stressing plants. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They're very sensitive.
They're very sensitive. Water doesn't happen. You've got a whole different environment in space. The soil, oxygens. There's a whole bunch of things that we can spend a whole nother section on.
Sure.
But
you gardeners out there know what we're talking about. Something just starts getting going good. You go out there one day, it looks great. The next day you're going, why did this leaf start to go brown?
And the microbial community, what we call that diversity, helps protect them. It gives them mine further out to get nutrients or compounds that get resistance. And the things we've been looking at are where you can make fertilizer for the plants. They can mine these regoliths we were talking about better. So these plant microbe interactions, we did these experiments. We began to see they were working a little more effectively in space than Earth. And so our laboratory spends quite a bit of our effort looking to confirm for ourselves that we can commercialize these things.
Great insight there. We've got a question, Marty?
Yeah, I think it's a question. I apologize, Cynthia, if it's not, but Cynthia Rossi, she said, I would imagine that freshwater vegetables would have to take up a lot of volume of lab to grow enough for harvesting, and then it's a question mark. So I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement.
Yeah.
Like it's a good question. You got to have a lot of room. That's what it said.
There is. So the criteria that we use, very, very insightful question there, because the criteria that we have for growing would be things like it's got to be a very short life cycle. So we don't want to spend a lot of time just growing it where something can fail and that's stress. Second, it's got to be very, very productive. So it's producing a lot of fruit on a very small plant. And the other is dwarfiness. So it doesn't take up much volume. So the selection of things like tomatoes or dwarf tomatoes. Some of these varieties are no more than 8 inches tall, or just a few centimeters. Same with peppers. Lettuce are very compact. So much of our effort now has been on these dwarf plants. When I was growing wheat, it was a super dwarf wheat. It never got, taller than a foot. But get head. So
great question.
Very good question, and that is the consideration. Yep.
Well, I see Bezos, once he gets the New Glenn rocket going up there with the largest fairing ever, taking up a whole greenhouse unit up there to grow things. I mean, that's what it needs, correct?
From the work that we did now back in the 90s, which should have better data by now, but we don't, is we needed about 20 square meters. Actually, something about this office, not quite this big. To give us all the
20 by 20, 20 by 10 room.
Yep. This would produce enough water for like 4 of us, about maybe all of the oxygen that we need, and about half the food for one person for a year. But you've got to manage those rights and ups and downs. So it's going to take some big space, but we haven't integrated with the new technologies, the new knowledge at this level of scale that we need to do.
Well, I know Tom Usiak in Pennsylvania is enjoying this conversation with Dr. Gary Stutte and Bill Whiting. Hope you're feeling better up in Michigan. Dave Stangy's up there in Michigan, too. Whiting's a Spartan and Stangy's a Wolverine.
All right, well.
Of course, I'm a Buckeye.
You're a Buckeye. Well, we were in the Southeast Conference.
But,
so
that's right.
We didn't think about you guys.
We're in the Southeast Conference, the Rays of Arkansas.
We didn't think about you guys all that much.
So, Cynthia Rossi, you're thinking about us. We appreciate that. Fox McLeod, glad to have you on board. Doug Forrest is there he's outside of Jet Propulsion Lab in California, there, Pasadena area.
Beautiful
Good friend of ours. He's been in our museum. Doug Forrest has. Excellent pencil artist. I'll show you his work.
Oh, I look forward to that.
Faith Rain.
Faith Rain is a good friend of mine. I'm glad to see she's come on.
Well, thank you, Faith, for watching your buddy here. Steve J. is the Lake County Spaceport. Space Nerds watching. Gary Gerald is our Vidalia onion and peanut farmer. He brought us some gigantic, I've never seen bigger, tastier Vidalia onions up there. So you were in Europe, and I was trying to get a hold of you when that's going on.
And
I know Gary, being a farmer, enjoys this. He may even have a question there. Tammy Miller, thank you for watching today. And stay tuned here. We're going to show you Gary's going to have an online class, that we're going to talk about. Let's show you some of the habitats that you're thinking about.
That was a habitat up at the University of North Dakota. It's an inflatable habitat, and various analog missions will go in from 2 to 3 weeks of crews setting in. You can tell it's pretty isolated and cold.
Yeah,
and that's where we began.
Well, anywhere in North Dakota is.
Yeah, except in summertime. And that's where we began looking for how we could convert regolith. And what the crews, we converted those from inedible regolith to something that would grow plants.
Got a question, Marty?
You got a question from Gary Gerald.
Yes.
Gary, do you think there will be a disease risk in the plants in control room?
There is always a disease risk. And so the efforts that we take are to, one, have strong plants, so we have some resistance, that we are selecting for, clean rooms and sanitation going up. And part of my work is with the microbial communities to help give some resistance with the good bugs to fighting off the bad organisms. But it will always be a risk. Now, that being said, in the 30 years of growing plants in these controlled environments under the NASA constraints, our biggest problem has not been the biological diseases, but has been the failure of hardware, where you'll begin to get a stress on the plant, and then they will show it from nutrients don't go, or water doesn't come out, or you get a pH shift. But it is certainly a risk, and certainly a concern we take very seriously.
To follow up Gary Gerald's question there, going to Mars and growing things out of Martian soil, is that an advantage because we're assuming it's a virgin soil? Or is it? We don't know what kind of Martian microbes could be in there.
We don't know.
So you could control things better.
You could control things better with the exception that you're taking human beings with us. Oh. And human beings are covered with microbes. And so we have microbes with us. There is a substantial population within our guts. They're very essential to our health and well-being. So there are two two thoughts. One is you sterilize things to make sure that nothing is coming in. My thought is different than that. Is have human beings, so I'm not going to keep everything out. So we will provide a diverse community that can fight off the bad guys when they arrive.
Good questions. As we're ending our conversation with Gary here, we wanted to talk about your outreach with kids all over the world. And what do you see as you go from America to Spain and some other areas?
I see an incredible amount of interest.
You've been in Brazil, no?
And in the Brazil, we work with a group that is, the KSC International Academy. I think you've had them on here before.
Jefferson Michaelis Foundation.
And that group. They do an outstanding job. I work with them in training teachers and training students, and then the trainers for the trainers on these demonstrations. I see, an incredible amount of interest everywhere I go. Mm-hmm. And that not only what we can be doing in space, but how that can be implemented in their lives and their efforts. And that was really one of the first engagements I had with this museum. How can we take that technology to engage some activity and interest on applying plants here in space?
Do you find kids are interested in growing up to be you?
Every now and then. I will always encourage them that they should grow up to be themselves.
Oh, okay, good. Well, I encourage them not to go into liberal arts like I did, go into engineering and make some money. Okay.
Well, my son went and asked me, and he's got a liberal arts degree, and it was, if you're going to deal with people and understand and talk with people, if you learn how to write and you learn how to speak and you learn how to think and you deal with people, then you're going to be just fine.
That's good. Well, you all learn more about from Dr. Stutte here. You are actually, you've been on a podcast or two. You're no stranger to that. What plants crave?
What plants crave, and
what do plants crave from technology?
They want the optimum conditions to survive. They want their temperatures to be right, the relative humidity. They want the right amount of light. They want the water and the nutrients to be maintained. And that's the challenge of going into controlled environments with limited power, volume, and energy. That how do you keep that right? Mm-hmm. How do you maintain this balance between what people want, which is, a lot of oxygen, and what plants want is a lot of CO2. How can you balance those to maintain that optimum environment?
When you heard Gary, they need some better machinery maybe that's more reliable. So if you're interested in things like that, there's all kinds of avenues about that. But Gary, you can teach people about these things that you just were talking about. Tell us about your upcoming online courses.
Well, I get asked a lot, how do we do this? How do we apply it? Do you do this? What's best? What you just asked me. What do they need? How do you get them? And
what kind of music do they like?
Exactly. Do they listen to music?
Do they?
They don't, unless you think the sound of the wind is blowing. So,
okay.
All
right.
They do have thigmomorphogenesis. They can get touched, so I guess there's something in that. But we're going to put together an online course of the basics of hydroponics. There's a lot of information out there, a lot of equipment. Do I do this light? Do I do this system? This tall thing, this small thing? To get some of the basics in there of, when you're looking to buy, what are you wanting to do? How do you achieve it? What do the plants need? And what are you doing is going to provide that to them. So that's going to be the goal of that course, to take some of this knowledge we've had to very concentrated, to figure out how we're going to grow plants with very little input and supervision as we're going to Mars to here on Earth.
Well, excellent. Those of you that want to grow plants indoors, hydroponics, whatever, go to Synergy.com, SYNRGE.com, and you can sign up for that. And when are you going to kick that off, Gary?
Oh, probably in the next 6 weeks or so.
Okay.
That's in a process.
Well, please let us know so we can help you with that on Stay Curious.
We will, and we have a site we're going to dedicate with that to drstutte.com. So sign up for the newsletter, and we can keep people posted.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Marty, you got another question there.
Yeah, Cynthia asked a question several minutes ago, but I didn't want to break in the conversation about plants. But she wants to know, Gary, let me find it again. Oh, could the launch photo be from the Falcon Heavy launch January 15th of this year?
It very well could have been. I think that was the Heavy. But I'd have to go look.
Okay.
Thank you, Cynthia, for reminding me how poor my memory is.
Yeah. Oh, the photo that we took there.
That's right.
You know what? She noticed there's 2 nozzles up there at the top.
Ah.
All right. On the echo of the top up there, I noticed there's 2 flames up there.
Then you're absolutely right.
So,
then that would have been a Heavy.
Yeah.
Good eye. Good eye.
And I think we were over at by the bank on the south side of the bank over there, not by Spaceview Park,
Right.
but over by that little area. So I saw you over there. Great. Well, everybody loves the rocket launches. Cynthia Rossi, thank you for chiming in there. Thank you all for watching Stay Curious and our 900th episode with my friend and co-producer Marty Winkle. Karan Conklin, our executive producer, is why we've gone on this long. She saw the value in reaching out. Some of the numbers show that we're reaching over 200 people a day, and over time, it just all adds up. And we made $11 last month on YouTube. How about that?
Congratulations.
Yeah. That's right. I'll take you to lunch afterwards, all right? We'll get a hot dog down to Moonlight Drive.
There you go.
And Tommy Usiak wishes he could go with us because he loves that place.
I like that place myself.
Well, thank you all for being with us on Stay Curious. We seriously love you, and thank you for episode 900. Couldn't have had a better person on there to talk about something so important, yet I think is being ignored in the space industry, and that is food in space. Gary Stutte, we'll have you back on for another update in 6 months or so. Good luck to you all in your endeavors, all right? And to everybody out there, we hope you enjoy the weekend and come back to get more knowledge, some astronaut birthdays, and space history like no one else does at the American Space Museum and our Stay Curious program. Until then, I'm Marquette saying I can't wait to see you in our museum to bridge the space between us.